I'm going to ask you a question that has come up because, the FBI director has testified before Congress that he wasn't certain whether or not there were undercover operatives, FBI operatives, working on January 6th in the crowd. But an undercover journalist with Sound Investigations released a video you may be aware of in the last 2 days of a CIA official, former FBI member, actually saying, yes, there were. So I'm going to ask you a simple question. Were there undercover officers or agents from the Department of Homeland Security or paid informants in the crowd on January 6th?
Congressman, I don't know the answer to that question. I will follow up with you.
Wow is all I can say. Was Ray Epps a paid informant?
Congressman, I'm not familiar with those facts. I'd be very pleased to get them to you.
Thank you very much. And is it the policy of the Department of Homeland Security, because I understand it is the policy of the FBI to have undercover individuals at these events to kind of keep them in control, to allow people to peacefully exert their First Amendment rights while kind of, calling attention to people who might interfere with that. So is it the policy of the Department of Homeland Security to have undercover agents or officers or paid informants at events like that?
Events like?
Like a large protest somewhere. Where people attempt to exert their First Amendment rights.
Congressman, that is not where we focus our.
Okay, but if you get the answers to me on the other one, I'd appreciate that about January 6th, whether or not you had agents there. Okay, let me talk a little bit about the OIG. The OIG has complained that they attempt to get things from the Department of Homeland Security. I'm going to ask this letter to Chairman Green from January 17th from the OIG to be entered into the record, where she points out that the department over the past few years has used the excuse of the Privacy Act and the Presidential Records Act to withhold information from the OIG. Now, the purpose of the OIG, as you know, is Congress. We think the OIGs are important to keep an eye on the individual departments, and we would hope that the departments would always cooperate with their OIGs because otherwise it looks a little suspicious. So do you agree that the Privacy Act and the Presidential Records Act, in fact, do not affect the ability of the department to transfer information to the OIG?
Congressman, let me assure you that we cooperate fully with the Office of Inspector General, and we also appreciate the importance of the Inspector Generals in making sure our department is as efficient and effective as it can be.
Is your Inspector General Joseph Kafari?
Yes, he is.
But in this letter, he says you're not cooperating. And I'll enter in, Mr. Chairman, without objection, like that entered into the record.
Congressman, I respectfully disagree with the Inspector General.
Well, that's why we have Inspector Generals to actually keep an eye on the departments. And we expect when the department is doing something that they want to cover up, that they're not going to cooperate with the Inspector General. And then they're going to claim that they cooperate with the Inspector General. That's our cop on the beat. That's our cop on the beat watching the cops on the beat. Okay,
Congressman, assuredly, you are speaking of a department different than ours when you characterize that type of behavior.
That's not what the letter kind of indicates. Anyway, the last thing I want to talk about in the last remaining minute is the effect of offshore wind on search and rescue missions for the Coast Guard, because this is an issue, and we have an active port in Ocean City. We have a lot of commercial fishermen and private people who are worried that when they construct these huge offshore windmills off the coast of Maryland, that in fact Coast Guard search and rescue operations will be harmed. So I'm going to ask to enter into the record a U.S. Naval Institute study on offshore wind energy, a rising challenge to Coast Guard operations, that indicates the potential effects of these on search and rescue missions, clearly an important part of what the Coast Guard does, and clearly, preserving life and limb in the maritime environment should be one of the first things the government does before it expends huge amounts of money on offshore wind, a very expensive source of energy, but that's a discussion for a different agency. I also want to ask if you could follow up with the Coast Guard. There's a November 25, 2019 letter, which again I'll ask to be entered into the record, signed by the Director Captain Jennifer Williams, Director of Marine Transportation System, acting U.S. Coast Guards, where she suggests that ongoing studies are being done. This is now 4.5 years ago, with regards to the safety of offshore wind vis-a-vis search and rescue missions of the Coast Guard. Are you aware whether or not that determination has been made, whether it's been safe?
I'd be pleased to follow up with you, Congressman.
Thank you very much. And again, I ask that be entered into the record. And I yield back.